Have you ever seen something online that left you questioning reality? Something so strange, so bizarre, that you couldn't shake it from your mind, no matter how hard you tried? Well, that's exactly what happened when a mysterious Instagram filter began circulating. Its effect, so powerful, it revealed a truth that no one could have predicted. This story, the story I'm about to unfold for you today, starts like any other viral trend. A harmless filter, shared by millions, catching people's attention and spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. But what if I told you that this seemingly innocent filter was the key to uncovering something far darker? Something that had remained hidden for years. That's the mystery we're diving into today. You might think you know how this story ends. After all, it's just another online sensation, right? But this is not your typical viral story, and trust me, by the end of this video, you will see just how deep this rabbit hole goes. We're talking about a case of a missing child, someone whose face had been lost in the blur of time, until now. And it's not just any child. This is a child whose identity had been concealed in the most unimaginable way, and only this one Instagram filter could reveal the truth. Now, before you click away or think that you know where this is going, let me tell you something: you're not going to want to miss a single moment of this. Because what I'm about to show you is something that might make you question how you view the world around you. This isn't just about a child going missing, it's about uncovering a network of secrets that no one saw coming. So, stick with me, because you're about to witness the unraveling of something that will leave you breathless. I want you to picture this for a second. You're scrolling through your Instagram feed, like you do every day. You see posts from friends, family, maybe a few sponsored ads, and then, something catches your eye. A new filter. Just like every other trendy filter that's been floating around, but there's something about this one that feels different. It promises to reveal the truth and let you see things as they really are. But instead of just changing the colors of your face or giving you a fun background, this filter does something far more incredible. It changes the image you're seeing almost as if it's peeling back layers of reality itself. And when one particular user tried it, something remarkable happened, something no one could have predicted. What was revealed wasn't a fun effect or a playful transformation, it was a face that had been missing for years, a face that was buried in the mystery of an unsolved case. This child, who had vanished from the public eye, was suddenly staring back at the camera. The filter did what the police couldn't, what technology couldn't, and even what time couldn't. It unmasked the face of a child thought to be lost forever. Now, you might be wondering, how is this possible? How could a social media filter, something that people use for fun, be the key to unlocking the truth about a missing child? Well, I'm about to take you down a path you never expected. This isn't just a coincidence, and it's not just a story about social media gone viral. There's something far bigger at play here, something far more dangerous than just an innocent trend. But to understand how this happened, we need to go back to the beginning, back to when the child first disappeared. We need to understand the case, the people involved, and the strange series of events that led up to this very moment. As we dig into this mystery, you'll begin to see that this isn't just about one missing child. This is a story about a system, about the way information gets manipulated, hidden, and distorted. It's about how a simple, seemingly harmless piece of technology became the tool that cracked a case wide open. So, before we dive into all the details, I want you to ask yourself this: how many times have you seen something on social media that made you stop and think? Something that made you question whether what you were seeing was the whole truth, or just a sliver of it? What if I told you that this Instagram filter was the key to revealing the biggest lie that had been hidden from the public for years? It all started with a child who went missing under mysterious circumstances. The case had been cold for years, investigators had exhausted every lead, searched every corner of the city, and still, there were no answers. It seemed as though the child had vanished without a trace, lost to time and a world full of distractions. But the truth is, the answers had been right in front of us all along. They were hidden in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered. And it wasn't a detective, or a journalist, or even a family member who found them. It was a viral Instagram filter, used by millions, that accidentally unlocked a door to the truth. I know this all sounds too incredible to be real, but stay with me, because what you're about to learn is going to blow your mind. This isn't just a story of a missing child. It's the story of how the world's most unlikely tools can sometimes reveal the truth when we least expect it. You may be asking, how did this filter manage to solve a case that stumped professionals for years? What made it so special? And what does this reveal about the way we interact with technology? Well, we're going to answer all those questions, but I need you to stay with me. The journey we're about to take is going to be filled with twists and turns. I promise you, by the time this video ends, you'll be on the edge of your seat, wanting to know what happens next. You see, the filter wasn't just any filter, it had an unexpected, almost eerie, ability to highlight patterns and details that our brains don't normally pick up on. It wasn't until one user, someone who had been following the case closely, decided to try the filter on an old photo of the missing child that the first clue appeared. The result was chilling. The filter didn't just alter the picture. It revealed something that had been hidden in plain sight. It revealed a connection that no one had ever considered before. And that's when the investigation took an even darker turn. But there's more to this story. There's an entire web of lies, secrets, and cover-ups that stretches far beyond just one missing child. This Instagram filter didn't just uncover the identity of the child, it unveiled a network of people who had been working to keep the truth buried. And as we dig deeper, you'll see how everything started to fall apart once this mysterious filter was introduced into the equation. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we go further, let me introduce you to the key players in this story. First, there's the missing child, let's call her Emily. Emily was only 6 years old when she disappeared without a trace from her home. Her family, devastated by the loss, had no leads, no suspects, and no idea where she had gone. The case quickly became one of those heartbreaking unsolved mysteries that most people forget about as time passes. But her family never gave up, never stopped hoping for answers. Then, there's the Instagram filter itself, a tool that was initially designed to be nothing more than a fun distraction, a way for people to experiment with their selfies. But as you'll soon see, this filter was far more powerful than anyone could have imagined. And finally, there's the person who first used the filter on Emily's photo. This is someone who had been following the case for years, someone who couldn't let go of the mystery surrounding the disappearance. When they used the filter, they didn't expect to see anything unusual, but what they found would set off a chain of events that no one could have foreseen. As we continue on this journey, keep in mind that you're not just learning about a missing child. You're uncovering a story that raises questions about the power of technology, the dangers of hidden truths, and the lengths some will go to in order to protect those secrets. So, are you ready to see the truth? To discover what lies hidden beneath the surface of social media, and how one Instagram filter unraveled a mystery that had remained unsolved for years? Trust me, you'll want to stick around, because this story is just getting started, and the answers you've been looking for might be far closer than you think. But remember, the truth is always more complicated than we first imagine. And in the next part of this video, we'll begin to explore the shocking revelations that the filter uncovered. The stage is set, and everything you thought you knew is about to change. But before I go any further, I need to ask you one last question. Are you ready for what's coming next? Because trust me, you won't believe your eyes when you see it as we dive deeper into the story. Let me take you back to a time before the Instagram filter, before this bizarre twist in the case that would bring Emily's face back into the public eye. Let's focus on the people closest to this mystery. And when I say closest, I mean the ones who were left behind when Emily disappeared. Emily's family was a tangled web of emotions and secrets, each member carrying their own version of what happened that fateful day. But what you're about to hear is the part of the story no one expected, the part that no one, not even the authorities, could have guessed was the key to unlocking everything. Emily's parents, Sarah and Michael, had always been the picture of normalcy. On the surface, they were just another middle-class family in suburban America, living a quiet life in a cozy little neighborhood. Sarah worked as a teacher at the local high school, and Michael was a civil engineer with a steady job. They had a solid marriage, no history of domestic issues, and as far as anyone knew, their lives were as perfect as could be. But that's where the illusion started to crack. The things we don't talk about, the secrets we hide, are often the ones that shape our lives in the most unexpected ways. And in Emily's case, those secrets would begin to surface, bit by bit, when the filter was used. The first piece of the puzzle that began to raise suspicion was Michael's behavior. After Emily went missing, he seemed to withdraw into himself. At first, it made sense. Who could blame a father for grieving the loss of his child? But as the months dragged on, his reactions grew more erratic. He stopped talking to anyone about the case, refused to cooperate with the investigators, and began acting strangely when the police would question him. His withdrawal was so intense that it became impossible to ignore. It didn't help that his alibi for the day Emily disappeared was shaky at best. There were gaps in his story, things that didn't quite add up. But still, no one wanted to make assumptions, especially since there were no physical clues to suggest foul play. Sarah, on the other hand, held on to hope. She became obsessed with finding Emily, plastering missing posters everywhere, setting up social media accounts dedicated to the search, and doing everything in her power to bring attention to the case. But even her resolve began to waver as time went on, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden from her. Then came the strange call. It was late one evening, nearly a year after Emily's disappearance. Sarah answered the phone, only to hear a voice she didn't recognize. The voice on the other end claimed to have information about Emily, but the details were vague. The caller didn't speak clearly, their words broken up by static, but they said one thing that stuck with Sarah for weeks: the filter knows the truth. Sarah had no idea what the caller meant, but something about it chilled her to the core. She dismissed it at first as a prank or a hoax, but the words kept echoing in her mind. What did the caller mean? And why had they chosen to speak to her, of all people? The investigation into Emily's disappearance had hit a wall, and the case had become cold. The police were still looking for leads, but with each passing month, it seemed less likely that they would ever find anything that would lead them to her. The family's hope was slowly draining away, and with that, the attention from the media began to fade as well. But as we know now, the truth had been hiding in plain sight all along. It wasn't until that fateful day, when someone used the Instagram filter on Emily's old photos, that everything started to unravel. The moment that one user decided to try the filter, something shifted in the world around them. It wasn't just a fun transformation, they had unknowingly stumbled upon the first real clue in a case that had been cold for over a year. But even with this new lead, things didn't add up. What exactly was the connection between the filter and Emily? How could a simple social media tool, something used for entertainment, be so eerily accurate in revealing the child's face? To understand this, we need to take a closer look at the people who had been part of Emily's life before she disappeared. There were strange coincidences that began to emerge, ones that no one had noticed at first. And it wasn't just Emily's family who had been hiding something. There were others who had known more than they were letting on. Take the case of Sarah's best friend, Rebecca. Sarah and Rebecca had been inseparable since high school, their bond unbreakable. But after Emily went missing, Sarah began to notice a shift in Rebecca's behavior. Rebecca became distant, barely answering Sarah's calls, avoiding invitations, and generally pulling away from the investigation. At first, Sarah brushed it off, thinking Rebecca was just overwhelmed by the situation. But the more time passed, the more Rebecca's actions seemed off. It wasn't just that she was avoiding Sarah, it was the way she acted when they did speak. She seemed uncomfortable, as though she was hiding something. Sarah had no concrete evidence, but the nagging suspicion grew stronger with each passing day. Then, there was the matter of the neighborhood. Emily's disappearance had shaken the entire community, and everyone had their own theories about what had happened. Some believed it was a random kidnapping, while others whispered about the possibility of someone from the inside being involved. But the most curious thing was the number of people who had been unusually quiet about the case, people who should have been speaking out, but instead chose to remain silent. People who knew far more than they were letting on. And then, the most unsettling detail of all, the Instagram filter didn't just reveal Emily's face. It revealed a clue that no one had seen before. When the image was enhanced using the filter, a faint but distinct mark appeared on the child's neck, an unusual scar that hadn't been noticed in any of the photos before. It was a detail that was completely ignored by the police, but the filter had uncovered it. And that scar would soon lead to another shocking revelation. At this point, you might be wondering, what does all of this mean? Why are we focusing on these small details? Because every single one of them is connected. Sarah's distant friend, Rebecca's strange behavior, the neighbors who were acting suspiciously, these are the pieces of a much larger puzzle. And when the Instagram filter revealed that scar, it became clear that the truth was more twisted than anyone had imagined. It wasn't just a missing child anymore. This was a case of betrayal, deception, and a community that had kept its secrets for far too long. But the biggest question still remains: who was behind all of this? Who knew the truth and chose to hide it? As we get closer to the answers, the mystery only deepens, and each clue leads to more uncertainty. With every twist, we're left questioning, what really happened to Emily? And why did it take a viral Instagram filter to finally bring the truth to light? The road ahead is full of danger, lies, and betrayals. So stay with me, because we're just getting started and the truth is about to shatter everything you thought you knew about this case. Just as Sarah began to piece together the fragments of the mystery surrounding Emily's disappearance, something strange started happening. It wasn't just the strange, unsettling coincidences that kept piling up, it was the sudden, inexplicable obstacles that seemed to stand in her way at every turn. The more she dug, the more the world around her began to shift, as if forces were conspiring to keep the truth buried, to keep her from getting any closer. The first sign of trouble came the morning after Sarah tried to bring the scar from Emily's photo to the attention of the police. She had taken a screenshot of the enhanced image from the Instagram filter and sent it to Detective Harris, the lead investigator on the case. She felt a small spark of hope that this would finally break the case open. But when Harris called her back later that afternoon, Sarah's heart sank. The detective's voice was tight, his tone unusually cold. "Sarah, I need you to stay calm. The image you sent, it's gone." He paused before adding, "The entire file, all the evidence, it's vanished from the system. I don't know how, but it's as if it was erased." Sarah was stunned. She had saved the image on her phone and sent it via email. It should have been easy to retrieve. But now, even the police couldn't find it. It was as if someone had deliberately wiped it from existence. Panic started creeping into Sarah's mind. Who would do that? And why? What did they want to hide so badly? The realization that someone had the power to erase evidence was terrifying, and the feeling of being watched grew stronger with every passing day. But that wasn't the only obstacle Sarah faced. Soon after, strange things started happening around her home. At first, it was little things: an open window when she was sure she had closed it, the front door ajar even though she had locked it behind her. But then it escalated. One evening, Sarah found a note slipped under her door. It was simple, short, and chilling: "Stop looking. You don't want to know the truth." The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was clear: someone was warning her to stop digging. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. And as much as she wanted to ignore the threat, she knew she couldn't back down now. She had already come too far, and Emily's face, the scar, and everything in between were still haunting her thoughts. She had to keep going. But as Sarah pressed on, the danger grew more tangible. Rebecca, her old best friend, seemed to sense Sarah's rising determination to uncover the truth. Their conversations had become strained, and the distance between them felt wider than ever. When Sarah asked Rebecca about the night Emily disappeared, she deflected, her answers vague and hurried. Sarah couldn't put her finger on it, but something felt off. She decided to confront Rebecca, hoping to gain some clarity. It was late one evening when she made the call, her voice shaking as she asked, "Rebecca, do you know something about Emily's disappearance that you haven't told me?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Rebecca finally spoke. "You don't want to know, Sarah," Rebecca said, her voice eerily calm. "Some things are better left alone. Trust me, you'll regret it if you keep going down this path." Sarah's heart raced as Rebecca hung up without another word. It was the first time Sarah had heard Rebecca's voice so cold and distant. But what struck Sarah the most wasn't the conversation, it was what Rebecca had said. "You'll regret it." Those words echoed in her mind, sending a chill down her spine. Could it be that Rebecca knew more than she was letting on? Or was she trying to warn Sarah away from something darker? Either way, Sarah couldn't ignore the feeling that Rebecca was hiding something crucial. The next few days were a blur of frustration and fear. Sarah tried to push forward, but the walls around her seemed to be closing in. She sought out old neighbors, people who might have seen something on the day Emily vanished, but they all offered the same response: we didn't see anything unusual. Everyone she talked to seemed to be hiding behind the same veil of indifference, as though they had all agreed to turn a blind eye. The more Sarah reached out, the more the silence grew. But then, just when she was about to give up, she received a phone call from an unexpected source, Detective Harris. His voice was low, almost whispering, as if he was afraid someone would hear him. "Sarah, I need you to listen very carefully," he began, the urgency in his tone sending a rush of adrenaline through her veins. "I don't know who I can trust right now, but you need to know something. I've been investigating this case longer than I should have. I've uncovered things I'm not supposed to know." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Was this the break she'd been waiting for? Was Harris finally going to give her the answers she needed? He continued, his voice trembling slightly. "I've been looking into the original investigation, the files, the people who were involved. There's something about this case that doesn't add up, and I'm starting to think it goes deeper than just Emily. There's a pattern here, something that connects a lot of the people involved, including Rebecca. But it's dangerous, Sarah. You need to be careful." Before Sarah could respond, the line went dead. The call was cut off, leaving her in stunned silence. She tried to call him back, but the phone rang endlessly, with no answer. It was as if Harris had vanished without a trace. The sense of dread that had been creeping up on her now gripped her fully. She was sure of one thing: someone didn't want her to uncover the truth, and they were willing to go to extreme lengths to stop her. As Sarah sat in her dimly lit living room, her mind raced with questions. What had Harris uncovered? And what did Rebecca know? The more she thought about it, the more the pieces of the puzzle seemed to shift and blur, refusing to fit together in a way that made sense. The scar, the filter, the missing evidence, it was all tied together somehow, but the connections were still elusive, like a thread that kept slipping through her fingers. In the days that followed, Sarah began to feel the weight of her investigation more than ever. The threats, the strange behavior of those around her, and the sense that something far more sinister was at play, it was all becoming too much to bear. Yet, as the clues slowly started to align, a chilling realization began to settle in: the people she trusted most might not be trustworthy at all. The question now was this: who could Sarah trust, and what was she willing to risk in order to uncover the truth? As she sat alone in her apartment, the tension thick in the air, she knew one thing for sure: the deeper she dug, the more dangerous it became. And yet, she couldn't stop. She was too close now, and the final answer was within reach. But before Sarah could take another step, the story would take an unexpected turn, one that would leave her questioning everything she thought she knew. And just as she prepared to go all in, something happened, something that would turn the entire investigation on its head. But that, my friends, is a story for the next chapter. Stay with me, because what happens next will change everything. As Sarah sat there, the weight of the investigation pressing down on her like a heavy fog, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being drawn into a much larger web than she had ever imagined. But just as she was beginning to process the eerie phone call from Detective Harris and the cryptic message from Rebecca, another thread of the story emerged, one that was about to throw everything she thought she knew into chaos. It wasn't just her anymore. The stakes had shifted, and now, more people were beginning to feel the repercussions of the truth coming to light. It started with her brother, Jake. He had always been her anchor, someone who had supported her through the disappearance of Emily, trying to hold the family together when everything seemed to be falling apart. They had always shared a strong bond, even though they were miles apart in age. Jake had his own life in the city, but he made a point to check in on Sarah as she navigated the investigation. She'd always felt safe talking to him, and over the past few weeks, she had started confiding in him more and more, unable to keep the pressure of the case to herself. But Jake, like everyone else, didn't seem to fully grasp how deep the danger had become. One afternoon, just as Sarah was trying to make sense of her next move, she received a message. It wasn't from any number she recognized, and when she opened it, her heart sank. It was a text that simply read, "You're not the only one being watched." At first, Sarah thought it might be another one of the empty threats that had been thrown her way. But then, as she looked closer, something caught her eye: a photo attached to the message. It was an image of Jake, her brother, sitting alone in a coffee shop, seemingly unaware that he was being photographed. The timestamp on the image was clear. It had been taken just a few hours earlier. It wasn't just a coincidence, it was a warning. Whoever had sent the message knew exactly who Sarah's family was, where they were, and what they were doing. The connection between Emily's disappearance and these strange events was starting to become too close for comfort. Sarah felt her pulse quicken as the realization hit her. Someone was keeping a close eye on not just her, but everyone she loved. Was Jake now a target, too? She tried to call him immediately, but the line went straight to voicemail. Panic surged through her, the kind of panic she hadn't felt in a long time. She knew she couldn't afford to wait. She needed to get to him, but she had no idea where he was, or who could have been watching him. As she grabbed her jacket and rushed out the door, she couldn't shake the thought that everything she had uncovered so far might just be the tip of the iceberg. When she reached the coffee shop where Jake had been earlier, it was nearly empty. The barista behind the counter barely looked up as Sarah approached, her voice shaking as she asked, "Has my brother been here today?" "His name's Jake." The barista nodded, pointing to a small table near the back. The chair was pushed out, as if Jake had just left. But there was something strange about the table that caught Sarah's eye. It was empty, save for a piece of paper, a crumpled, slightly torn scrap. Her heart raced as she approached the table and unfolded it. The message on it was simple, but chilling: "I told you to stop. If you don't, there will be consequences." The note sent a cold shiver down Sarah's spine. This wasn't just a warning, it was a direct threat. A threat aimed at the people she cared about the most. As she stood there, her mind raced with possibilities. Could someone be targeting her family to stop her from finding out the truth? Who had the power to send these messages, to manipulate everything around her, to control the narrative in a way that she couldn't even begin to understand? But it didn't stop there. As Sarah carefully folded the note and tucked it into her pocket, her phone buzzed again, this time with an email from Detective Harris. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the subject line, "You need to see this." She opened it without hesitation, but as she scrolled through the message, her stomach dropped. The detective had attached a new piece of evidence, one that he hadn't shared with her before. It was an image of Emily's bedroom, taken shortly after she had gone missing. At first glance, it seemed like nothing unusual, a typical teenage girl's room, with scattered clothes and a few personal items. But as Sarah zoomed in on one corner of the room, something caught her eye. There, barely visible in the corner of a drawer, was a small envelope, one she'd never seen before. The envelope was crammed in a way that made it seem like it had been hidden quickly, and the markings on the outside weren't familiar to Sarah. What was inside that envelope? And why had it been overlooked by the investigators all this time? This new piece of evidence raised even more questions than it answered. How could something so crucial have been missed? Was it possible that the police had missed something so obvious, or was someone deliberately covering up key details to keep the truth from coming out? The more Sarah thought about it, the more everything began to feel like one giant puzzle, each clue leading to more uncertainty, more danger, and more unanswered questions. As the pieces began to fit together, the complexity of the situation became clearer. It wasn't just a missing child anymore. It wasn't just about Emily. This was about something much bigger, something hidden beneath the surface. And no one, not even those closest to her, seemed to be entirely truthful. But what disturbed Sarah the most was the fact that every time she uncovered a new clue, it seemed to lead her in a different direction, each path more dangerous than the last. Was it possible that the people she had trusted, Detective Harris, Rebecca, even her own brother, were all involved in some way? Had they been hiding things from her all along? The doubts continued to pile up, making Sarah feel more isolated, more uncertain about who to trust. But there was no turning back now. With every step she took, the danger became more real, and the truth felt just out of reach. Her mind flashed back to the phone call with Detective Harris. He had sounded afraid, hesitant. And now, with everything that had happened since then, she couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that he had been trying to tell her something more, something he couldn't say over the phone. Was he in danger, too? Had he been forced into silence? Her thoughts spiraled, and she couldn't push away the creeping fear that the entire investigation was a trap, one that was slowly tightening around her. But it wasn't just the case that had her on edge. It was the strange messages, the sudden disappearances, the feeling that there was no one she could trust anymore. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Every creak of her apartment building felt like someone was lurking in the shadows, waiting. The silence that enveloped her room seemed suffocating, each moment dragging on as if the hours themselves were working against her. She had tried to convince herself that she was just tired, that all the stress and paranoia had gotten to her. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. Something had changed. It wasn't until the following morning that Sarah's worst fears began to take shape. She woke up to a text message from Jake, one that seemed out of place, the kind of message that left her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm heading out of town for a few days. Don't try to reach me." Her first instinct was to call him, but when she dialed his number, it went straight to voicemail. No explanation, no warning, just a sudden disappearance. It didn't make sense. Jake had never just vanished like this, not without telling her where he was going. Something was off, and as Sarah's mind raced, she couldn't shake the feeling that his sudden departure wasn't a coincidence. Had he been taken? Had he been warned to stay away from her, to stop helping with the investigation? The thought twisted in her gut, gnawing at her, but she couldn't ignore it. She had to find out what had happened to him, and fast. The hours that followed were a blur of frantic phone calls and desperate searches. She reached out to everyone who might know where Jake had gone, friends, co-workers, even his ex-girlfriend, but no one had heard from him. As Sarah retraced his last known movements, it became clear, Jake had disappeared without a trace. No one had seen him leave the coffee shop, and his car was gone. There were no signs of him anywhere. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. The fear she had been fighting for weeks now bubbled to the surface, and she knew, deep down, that she wasn't just in danger, they were all in danger. But what terrified her even more was the eerie silence. No phone calls, no threatening messages, nothing. It was as if the people behind this, whoever they were, had gone quiet, waiting for Sarah to make her next move. The tension in the air was palpable, and Sarah's mind couldn't stop turning over the worst-case scenarios. Was she being lured into a trap? Was this all part of some bigger game she didn't understand? How long before she, too, disappeared? By late afternoon, the isolation felt unbearable. With every corner she turned, every shadow that moved, Sarah felt the walls closing in. She couldn't shake the overwhelming sense that she was being watched, that someone was just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. The small, everyday things that used to give her comfort, her morning coffee, the familiar hum of the city, now felt foreign, threatening, as if the entire world around her had shifted into something darker. Her phone buzzed suddenly, and Sarah jumped. It was an unknown number. Hesitantly, she picked up the call, holding her breath. There was silence on the other end for a few moments before a voice spoke. It was low, distorted, and unfamiliar, yet somehow Sarah recognized the tone, the coldness, the menace. "You've been warned, Sarah. Stay out of it. Or you'll end up just like him." The line went dead before Sarah could respond. The words echoed in her mind, and she felt her blood run cold. Just like him. It was the first time anyone had mentioned Jake directly. The realization that he was in danger, that he had somehow become part of this deadly game, made Sarah's stomach turn. The person on the other end had known everything about her, everything about Jake, and now, with those words, they were telling her to back off. But backing off wasn't an option anymore. Not when she was this close to finding out the truth. Not when she knew that everything she had worked for was dangling on the edge of a cliff, just waiting to fall. The fear, the urgency, it was all consuming now. Sarah's mind raced through every possibility, every scenario that could explain what was happening. Who was behind this? Why was Emily's case so important? And why had Jake disappeared? What did they want from her? The more she tried to connect the dots, the more confused she became. There were no answers, only more questions, and the feeling that she was running out of time. As night fell once again, Sarah found herself standing at the edge of a precipice. The mystery had become something much darker than she could have ever imagined. Someone out there was pulling the strings, and they were using everyone she loved to make sure she didn't find the answers. Her heart pounded in her chest, her breath quickening as the weight of her situation settled over her like a thick, suffocating fog. She was trapped in a nightmare, and the only way out was to keep going, to keep unraveling the tangled web of lies and secrets that had ensnared her. But as she moved forward, one thing became painfully clear: the deeper she dug, the more the danger intensified. And she wasn't sure how much longer she could survive it. But she wasn't about to stop. Not now. Because the truth was out there, and no matter the cost, she would uncover it. Just when Sarah thought she had reached the end of her rope, when every lead seemed to end in dead ends and every move she made felt like a step deeper into the unknown, everything she thought she knew about the case shattered in an instant. It happened when she least expected it, in a quiet, seemingly innocuous moment that, in hindsight, would reveal itself to be the turning point of the entire investigation. The message that came through her phone was one that she had been waiting for all along, yet when she read it, it made her question everything. "You've been looking in all the wrong places." The text was brief, cryptic, but it was the last person she'd ever expect to hear from who had sent it. It wasn't a stranger, a faceless enemy. No, it was Rebecca, the one person Sarah had trusted most throughout this ordeal. The woman who had been by her side, guiding her through the toughest moments, feeding her information, calming her fears. Or so Sarah had thought. But now, as she stared at the screen, her mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, all of them more terrifying than the last. What did Rebecca mean by this? And why, after everything, was she suddenly telling Sarah that everything she had been investigating was wrong? A sudden wave of nausea hit Sarah, the weight of the realization bearing down on her like a physical blow. She had trusted Rebecca with so much. The two had spent hours together, sharing theories, piecing together timelines, and for a while, it had felt like Rebecca was her only ally in this twisted journey. But now, it all felt like a lie. The thought lingered, wrapping itself around her thoughts like a chain she couldn't escape from. What if Rebecca had been playing her from the start? What if the only reason she had been so helpful was to lead Sarah down the wrong path? The fear that Sarah might be trapped in a web of manipulation hit her like a cold slap to the face, and she couldn't breathe for a moment. Was it possible that Rebecca had been in on it all along? Sarah's fingers shook as she typed a response, her heart pounding as she pressed send, but no sooner had she done so than another notification pinged on her phone. It wasn't Rebecca. This time, it was from Detective Harris. "Meet me. Now. It's urgent." The two messages, in rapid succession, only deepened Sarah's sense of dread. What was happening? Was Rebecca and Harris both on the same side, or were they playing her against each other? Her mind spun as she ran through the possibilities, each one more confusing and frightening than the last. The walls were closing in around her, and for the first time since all this began, Sarah wasn't sure who she could trust anymore. She met Detective Harris at the rundown diner they'd spoken at before. His face was a mask of tension, and he barely made eye contact as he slid into the booth across from her. Sarah didn't waste time. She had to know the truth. "What's going on, Harris?" she demanded, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and frustration. "What's happening with Rebecca? Why did she send me that message?" Harris didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folder, one that was thinner than it should have been, almost suspiciously so. As he opened it, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The pictures inside were a blur of faces, names, and places she didn't recognize, but they were familiar in a way that made her feel as though she were looking at a puzzle piece she had almost connected, but hadn't quite gotten right. The room seemed to tilt, her stomach dropping as she glanced up at Harris. "I think you need to understand something, Sarah," he said, his voice cold, his eyes avoiding hers. "This wasn't just about Emily. It never was." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. She couldn't comprehend them at first. What did he mean? Harris pushed the folder across the table toward her, and Sarah opened it with trembling hands. The first photo was of Rebecca, but not the Rebecca she knew. In the image, Rebecca was standing with a man Sarah had never seen before, both of them smiling, posing as if they were close, familiar. The man's face was obscured, but Sarah could make out the hint of a smile, one that seemed all too sinister in the context of everything that had happened. And then there was a name printed at the bottom: David Monroe. Sarah's mind spun. She knew the name. David Monroe was one of the lead investigators on the original case when Emily went missing. But she had never heard of him after the first few months, as if he had dropped off the map. Was Rebecca connected to him? Had she been working with him this whole time? The connection made no sense, and yet everything about it screamed that Sarah had missed something fundamental. Harris leaned in closer, his voice low. Rebecca is not who you think she is. She's been working with Monroe this whole time. She's part of a much bigger operation than you've realized, and her involvement with Emily's disappearance, well, that was just the beginning. The words barely made it through Sarah's fog of disbelief. Rebecca had been working with David Monroe? How could she have missed that? How could she have been so naive? The revelation hit her like a tidal wave, each new detail about Rebecca's betrayal drowning her further in confusion and fear. She had trusted Rebecca, had even believed she was helping her uncover the truth. But now it seemed that Rebecca had been manipulating Sarah from the very beginning, guiding her in ways that would lead her to believe the story was one thing when it was actually something far more sinister. As Sarah sat there, reeling from the shock, another message came through on her phone. This time, it was from an unknown number. You've been warned, Sarah. There's no turning back now. The words were chilling, but it wasn't the message itself that rattled Sarah, it was the timestamp on the text. It was sent while she was sitting across from Detective Harris, talking about Rebecca's betrayal. Someone had been watching her the entire time, waiting for the right moment to strike, to silence her before she could expose the truth. Her mind raced. What had she walked into? The case, the investigation, the people she had trusted, it wasn't what she had thought it was. Everything had been a lie, and she was just a pawn in a game far bigger and more dangerous than she could have imagined. The feeling of being watched, of being followed, it was all real. Sarah was no longer just a victim of Emily's disappearance, she had become a part of something much darker, something that was just beginning to unfold. And no matter how hard she tried to escape, no matter how many twists and turns she uncovered, there was only one thing she knew for sure: the truth she was so desperately seeking wasn't just elusive, it was lethal. The walls were closing in faster than she could escape, and as the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, Sarah realized something far more terrifying than anything she had imagined. She had just become a target in a conspiracy that spanned much deeper than she could have ever understood. And now, with nowhere left to turn, she would have to face the truth, no matter what it cost her. And the worst part? It was only just beginning. Sarah's mind raced as she walked down the dimly lit streets of the city, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of the truth that had just been unveiled was like a stone lodged in her stomach. Everything she had believed about the case, about Rebecca, about Detective Harris, everything was crumbling beneath her feet. The revelation that Rebecca was working with David Monroe, that she had been feeding Sarah false leads, it felt like a betrayal of the highest order. But as the gravity of the situation sank in, another realization hit her: she couldn't just walk away. She couldn't pretend that this was all some twisted mistake. The stakes were too high now. Too many lives were at risk, including her own. As she reached her apartment, she knew what she had to do. It wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore, it was about survival. And the only way she was going to survive was to confront the people she thought she could trust, to rip the lies out from under them and expose the dark underbelly of this conspiracy before it swallowed her whole. But even as she reached for her phone, her fingers hesitating over the screen, a cold sense of dread washed over her. Who could she trust now? Who was still on her side? The phone buzzed in her hand, startling her. It was a message from Harris. "Meet me. Now. I have answers." The text was short, urgent, and it almost felt like a lifeline if she could trust him. But after everything that had happened, how could she possibly trust anyone anymore? The words from Rebecca echoed in her mind: "You've been looking in all the wrong places." Was Harris part of this too? Had she been so blinded by the need to find the truth that she had overlooked the most obvious danger of all, the people right in front of her? With a deep breath, Sarah made a decision. She couldn't afford to wait. She couldn't afford to trust anyone completely. It was time to confront them both. She grabbed her coat and headed out the door, her mind a swirl of conflicting emotions. The question that haunted her now wasn't whether or not Harris was involved, it was whether or not he could be trusted long enough to help her get out of this alive. She arrived at the diner just as Harris texted again. "I'm here. Don't take too long." The urgency in his words felt like a warning, a subtle threat she couldn't ignore. She walked in, her eyes scanning the room for him. He was sitting in the back booth, his back to the wall, watching her approach with a grim expression. He stood as she sat down, his movements stiff and deliberate, as if he was waiting for something or someone. "I know you don't trust me right now," he started, his voice low. "But I need you to listen. This is bigger than both of us, Sarah. It's bigger than you could have ever imagined." Sarah's heart pounded harder in her chest. She wanted to shout at him, demand answers, but she knew it wouldn't help. She needed him to explain, to give her something solid, something to hold onto in this sea of uncertainty. "Who can I trust?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, but full of desperation. "Who is behind all this? Is it you? Or are you just another player in this twisted game?" Harris's face remained impassive for a moment, and Sarah could see the internal struggle behind his eyes. He was hesitating, he was hiding something. Finally, he spoke, his voice shaking slightly, as though the weight of the truth was too much for him to bear. "I never wanted you to get involved, Sarah. This case, it wasn't supposed to drag you in like this. You weren't supposed to find out what you did. But now that you have, there's no turning back." The words sent a chill through Sarah. There it was again. The sense that she was part of something far darker than she could comprehend. What was he not telling her? "Then tell me," she demanded, her voice shaking with frustration. "Tell me everything. I need to know who's behind this. I need to know why Emily was taken. And I need to know why you're so scared of telling me the truth." Harris's gaze faltered. "There's no easy way to say this, Sarah. But you're too deep into this now. The people behind it, they're watching us. They know everything. And the more you push, the more danger you put yourself in. They've already made it clear they won't stop until you're out of the picture." Sarah's pulse quickened. She was in deeper than she realized. But it wasn't just about the case anymore. She was facing an ultimatum, a choice that would define everything from here on out. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice raw, her hands trembling. "Run. Disappear. Give up everything and walk away." Harris looked down at his hands, his face filled with guilt. "I'm giving you a choice, Sarah. You can walk away right now. You can take the information I've given you, and I'll make sure you're safe. We'll leave this behind. We can disappear." Her stomach churned. The idea of running, of abandoning everything, it sounded tempting, almost like the only way out. The weight of the decision felt crushing. She could walk away, keep her life, keep her safety. The lies could stay buried. But the truth would remain a shadow, haunting her forever. Emily's face, Rebecca's betrayal, the people responsible, she couldn't live with herself if she just turned her back on it all. But then Harris dropped the bombshell that made her blood run cold. If you choose to stay, if you keep pushing for the truth, it's not just your life at risk. They've already targeted those close to you. Jake's disappearance wasn't random. He's part of this too. Her breath caught in her throat. "What?" she whispered, feeling the world tilt beneath her. "You're telling me Jake is involved in this? He's part of it?" Harris's face grew pale. "I don't know. But I'm telling you, if you keep going, if you dig any deeper, he's going to be the next one they come for." The words echoed in Sarah's mind, a brutal truth she wasn't ready to face. She had already lost so much, her trust, her safety, her sense of security, but the thought of losing Jake, of being the reason someone she loved was in danger, felt like too much. Yet, if she walked away now, if she let the truth slip away into the shadows, she would never be able to live with herself. The choice, the decision, it was unbearable. Harris leaned closer, his eyes pleading. "Sarah, you don't understand. They'll stop at nothing to protect themselves. If you keep going, they'll make sure you're silenced. You won't make it out alive." But even as he said the words, Sarah's resolve hardened. She couldn't walk away. Not when the truth was so close. She couldn't let fear stop her now. "I'm not backing down," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her chest. "I'll find out who's behind this. I'll bring them to justice, no matter what it takes." Harris stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he spoke again, his voice low. "Then you've made your choice. But remember, there's no going back. Not anymore." The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. And as Sarah walked out of the diner into the cold night, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was just beginning. The clock was ticking. And now, with the ultimatum hanging over her head, the stakes had never been higher. Sarah barely had time to process Harris's warning before everything started to spiral out of control. The moment she stepped back into the street, the world felt different, darker, more dangerous, as though an invisible weight had settled over her. Every glance she made over her shoulder felt like a cold breath on her neck, every rustle in the wind a potential threat. But as the realization that her life was no longer her own began to sink in, it wasn't just the danger to her that terrified her, it was the overwhelming scale of what was happening. It wasn't just Emily anymore. It wasn't just about a missing child. The conspiracy, the forces at play, it was all far bigger, far more entangled than she had ever imagined. She couldn't shake the image of Jake, his face full of confusion and fear when he vanished. He was part of this, he had to be. But why? Why had the people behind this chosen him? Was he a pawn? Or had he been involved in something deeper, something she couldn't even begin to understand? The more Sarah tried to piece it together, the more the walls seemed to close in on her. She tried calling Jake, but the phone rang out. It wasn't like him to ignore calls, especially from her. Panic began to crawl up her spine, but she pushed it down. No. She couldn't afford to panic. She had to stay focused. Her only choice now was to confront Rebecca. To demand answers from the woman who had once been her closest ally and yet had turned out to be a key player in this monstrous game. But when Sarah arrived at Rebecca's apartment, the sight that greeted her stopped her dead in her tracks. The door was ajar, just a crack, but the unmistakable scent of burnt paper wafted out. With a sinking feeling, Sarah pushed the door open, and what she found inside was worse than any of her worst fears. Rebecca's apartment had been ransacked. Papers scattered across the floor, drawers emptied. It was as though someone had been searching for something, or had been trying to destroy something. But that wasn't what hit Sarah the hardest. It was the photo she found on the floor, half-burned but still recognizable. It was a picture of Rebecca, standing with David Monroe, the same man whose name she had seen in the file Harris had shown her. Only now, Rebecca was holding something in the picture. A file. One that had the name Sarah Porter written in bold, dark letters across the top. The blood drained from Sarah's face. How had Rebecca gotten a file on her? And what did it mean? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, but before she could react, a voice she didn't expect rang out. "It's over, Sarah." She spun around, her eyes wide with disbelief. There, standing in the doorway, was Jake. But this wasn't the same Jake she had known, the one who had been her rock throughout this nightmare. His eyes were cold, distant, and the familiar warmth she once felt in his presence had been replaced by something darker, more calculated. "Jake, what the hell is going on?" Sarah demanded, her voice shaking, but she couldn't stop herself. She needed to know. She had to know why he had disappeared. Why he had been involved in all of this. Jake didn't answer at first. Instead, he stepped forward, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Sarah's pulse quickened as the tension between them thickened. She couldn't move. She couldn't speak. All she could do was watch as Jake reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something that made her stomach lurch, a burner phone. "Jake," she whispered, her voice barely audible. You've been working with them, haven't you?" He didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes was enough. The truth hit Sarah like a tidal wave, crashing into her, knocking the breath out of her lungs. Jake had been part of this all along. He had been working with the same people who had taken Emily. He had been helping them, feeding her false leads, hiding the truth. He was the one who had betrayed her. "You don't understand, Sarah," Jake finally said, his voice low and emotionless. "This isn't about you. This isn't about Emily. This is bigger than anything you've imagined. They had to make sure you were out of the picture, and the only way to do that was to make you believe you were getting closer to the truth." The air seemed to leave the room as Sarah's mind raced. She had trusted him. She had believed in him. And now, all of it was nothing but a lie. Her heart shattered, the weight of his betrayal suffocating her. Why, Jake? Why would you do this? Jake's expression flickered for a moment, just the slightest hesitation in his gaze, before he spoke again. Because you were too close. You were going to ruin everything. He paused, as though considering his next words carefully. They wanted Emily, but they needed you to be out of the way first. The truth, the real truth, it's something you wouldn't be able to live with. But they needed someone to take the fall, someone who could lead them straight to the heart of this. And that someone was you. The world around Sarah felt like it was spinning, like she was losing her grip on everything she knew. The conspiracy, the lies, everything was so much bigger than she had ever imagined. They weren't just targeting her, they were targeting everything she loved. Emily. Her family. Her life. I won't let you get away with this, she whispered, every ounce of anger and pain bleeding through her voice. But even as she said the words, the truth settled in her chest like ice. Jake wasn't just a victim in this story, he was a key player. And whatever was happening, whatever this was, it wasn't going to end until everything she had fought for was taken from her. Suddenly, the door slammed open behind her, and a group of men dressed in black rushed into the room. Their faces were masked, their movements quick and deliberate. It was clear they weren't here for small talk. Jake, one of them said, his voice curt, commanding. We need to move her. Now. Without warning, they grabbed Sarah, pulling her toward the door. She fought, struggling against their grip, but it was no use. It wasn't until they shoved her into a van, her hands bound behind her, that the full weight of the situation hit her. The people behind this conspiracy weren't just playing games. They weren't just trying to cover up one child's disappearance. They were orchestrating something much larger, something far more dangerous than Sarah could have ever fathomed. And now, she was trapped in the very center of it. As the van doors slammed shut, and the world outside faded into darkness, Sarah's thoughts were a blur of fear, rage, and confusion. The stakes were higher than ever. She had no idea where they were taking her or what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure, the truth was out there. And she would stop at nothing to uncover it, even if it meant losing everything in the process. The story was just beginning, and now the real game was about to begin. The cold steel of the van's interior pressed in on Sarah as it rumbled down the dark highway, the sound of the tires against the pavement a rhythmic drumbeat that matched the frantic pulse in her chest. The men in black, their faces still hidden behind the dark masks, had no words for her as they watched her struggle, her wrists bound tightly behind her. She had no idea where they were taking her, where this twisted web of lies and deceit was leading her. Her mind raced through every possible scenario, every theory, but none of it made sense. She couldn't understand why she was still alive. Why they hadn't just silenced her like they had done with so many others who had gotten too close to the truth. Was this part of the plan? Or was there something she was missing? The van slowed to a stop, and the doors were flung open. Before Sarah could gather her bearings, one of the masked men grabbed her by the arm, pulling her out into the cold night air. The chill cut through her like a knife, but she barely noticed it as she was dragged forward, the blinding light of a flashlight swinging in front of her face. Everything was disorienting, she couldn't see clearly, couldn't get a grip on her surroundings. All she could do was focus on one thing, finding a way out. The group led her through a tall, rusted gate and into what appeared to be a sprawling, abandoned complex. Her heart sank as they pushed her through the darkened corridors, their footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. There was a cold, industrial smell in the air, like metal and old wood, but it was mixed with something more sinister, something she couldn't place. This was no ordinary place. Whatever it was, it felt like the final stage of this nightmare. They reached a large, windowless room. The door slammed behind her with a deafening bang, and Sarah was left standing in the center of a bare, concrete floor. The only light came from a single overhead bulb, casting harsh shadows on the walls. And then, through the shadows, a figure stepped forward, a figure she knew all too well. Rebecca. She looked different now, her usual calm, calculating demeanor replaced with something darker. Her eyes were cold, distant, and her face was drawn tight with exhaustion. But it was the smirk playing on her lips that sent a chill through Sarah's spine. I didn't expect you to make it this far, Rebecca said, her voice low and full of mockery. "But then again, I underestimated you. I thought you'd break long before now." Sarah's blood boiled as she took a step forward. "Why, Rebecca? Why all this? You were supposed to be on my side. She cut herself off, the words feeling like they were lodged in her throat. It was a betrayal of a magnitude she could hardly comprehend. How could the woman who had been her closest ally in all of this, the one who had helped her search for the truth, have been working with the people responsible for Emily's disappearance from the start? How could she have lied to her so completely? Rebecca's smirk deepened, and she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You still don't understand, do you, Sarah? It was never about you. It was never about Emily. It was about control. Power. The truth you've been chasing, it's not the one you think it is." Sarah's mind reeled. "What are you talking about?" Rebecca stepped back, her arms folding across her chest as she surveyed Sarah like a predator eyeing its prey. "You think this whole thing was about one little girl going missing? No, Sarah. That was just the beginning. You're too deep into this to see the bigger picture, and now you'll never be able to unsee it." "Tell me what you mean," Sarah demanded, her voice breaking with a mix of fear and rage. Rebecca's lips curled into a dark smile. "You've been chasing the wrong leads. You've been so focused on Emily, so focused on finding one missing child, that you never saw what was really going on. The people behind this, they don't just want to take children. They want to take control of the future. The kind of future where they hold all the power. Emily was a piece of a much larger puzzle. And you were the perfect person to put it all together." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She was finally starting to piece it together, but it was worse than she could have imagined. This wasn't just about one kidnapping. This was about a network, a far-reaching conspiracy that spanned much deeper than she had ever realized. And she had unwittingly walked right into its heart. "You," Sarah whispered, her mind struggling to keep up with the enormity of the situation, "you were the one who brought me here, weren't you? You set me up from the start." Rebecca's laugh echoed in the empty room. "It wasn't just me. You've been playing right into their hands the whole time. All the clues you've been following, all the evidence you've uncovered, it was all planned. Everything you thought you knew, everything you thought you understood, it's been a lie." The realization hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. She had been used. Played like a pawn in a game far beyond her understanding. But what could she do now? They had her cornered. And just when she thought there was no way out, the door to the room flew open, and another figure entered, a figure she never expected to see. Jake. But he wasn't the Jake she knew. The warmth she had once seen in his eyes was gone, replaced with a cold, steely determination. He looked at her, his gaze unreadable, and for a moment, Sarah didn't know if she should feel relief or terror. "Jake," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. Please tell me this isn't true. You're not part of this, are you? You're not working with them." "Everything you thought you knew," Harris said, his voice hardening, "was just a game. A game I'm ending." With those final words, Sarah understood. She had thought she was chasing one truth, one mystery, but the reality was far darker than she could have imagined. The battle for control, the manipulation, the betrayals, it wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The true mastermind was still out there, pulling the strings, waiting for the moment to strike. And as the tension in the room reached its boiling point, Sarah realized that the fight for the truth and for her life was far from finished. The final twist hadn't even come yet as the weeks passed. Sarah struggled to piece together the shattering events that had turned her life upside down. The full weight of everything, the betrayals, the manipulation, the conspiracy, still felt like a dark cloud hanging over her, even though the immediate danger had passed. Detective Harris, the one person who had been there when the dust settled, had helped her navigate the aftermath, offering support and guidance as she began to understand just how deep the network ran. What she had uncovered, what she had been swept into, was far more than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about the disappearances or the children, it was about a system of control, a shadow organization that had operated in the dark for years. And in the end, it was her relentless pursuit of the truth that had exposed the cracks, leading to the downfall of many of the people involved. The arrest of key figures within the conspiracy, including several high-ranking individuals, had sent shockwaves through the media. The story had become national news, Sarah's story. The missing children, the dark web of power and influence, it all became a horrifying revelation that no one could ignore. In the aftermath, Sarah found herself standing at the center of something bigger than she had ever imagined, and yet, it was hard to find any comfort in it. The answers had come, but they hadn't brought peace. Emily had been found, her rescue a bittersweet moment that brought a fragile sense of relief. But there was no clean resolution. No neat ending. Emily's face, forever etched in Sarah's memory, was still out there in the world, forever changed by everything that had happened. And for Sarah, the knowledge that she had not been able to protect the one person she had fought so hard for haunted her. There were moments when she caught herself staring out into the distance, wondering if it was all worth it. All the pain, all the sacrifices, had they led to anything meaningful? Had she truly stopped the darkness, or had she just uncovered one layer of a much larger and far more sinister world? But then, there were flashes of clarity. She saw Emily, now safe, playing with a ball in the park, her face filled with the joy of a child who had been given back a part of herself that had been stolen. Sarah saw Harris, no longer a shadowy figure of suspicion, now a genuine ally who had kept his word and supported her through the storm. And she knew, in those moments, that even though the world felt unpredictable, even though the forces that controlled so much of it remained in the background, she had made a difference. She had exposed the truth. She had fought for what was right, and in that fight, she had won, even if it didn't feel like a victory. But the hardest part was accepting the things she could never truly understand. There were still pieces of the puzzle that remained unsolved, mysteries that hung in the air like a fog Sarah couldn't clear. The whispers of a shadowy figure, someone who had been behind it all, someone who had managed to evade capture, still lingered in her mind. She had caught a glimpse of the truth, but the full picture, was it truly ever meant to be seen? Harris had warned her that the conspiracy was deeper than anyone had suspected, and while some key players had been arrested, there were others who still operated in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. The question of who was truly pulling the strings remained unanswered. It was like a thread that Sarah couldn't pull without unraveling everything. As the months passed, Sarah learned to live with the uncertainty. She couldn't let it consume her. Emily needed her to be strong, to be present, and to embrace the future without constantly looking over her shoulder. But every so often, in the quiet of the night, Sarah would catch herself wondering if the battle was really over, or if it had just begun. There were days when the unease never quite left, when the feeling that something was still out there, something waiting, hovered just beneath the surface of her mind. And when she looked at the world, she wondered if everyone else had noticed the shadows lurking just beyond their view. On a cold autumn evening, as Sarah walked through the park with Emily, the last remnants of the sunset painting the sky in vibrant shades of orange and purple, she stopped for a moment, her heart racing for reasons she couldn't place. There, in the distance, just outside the park gates, she saw a figure standing in the shadows. A figure she didn't recognize, but whose presence was impossible to ignore. He was watching her. Watching them. Sarah's breath caught in her throat, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stretch, the world slowing down. The figure didn't move. Didn't approach. But the way he stood there, so still, so deliberate, sent a chill down her spine. It was like a lingering question, a symbol of everything that had been left unresolved. She didn't say anything to Emily. She didn't want to scare her, not now. She just kept walking, every step feeling heavier than the last. The figure remained in the background, like a shadow that refused to leave her thoughts, as if reminding her that the story she thought she'd closed was never truly finished. Maybe, she thought, there was no perfect resolution. Maybe the only thing she could do was keep moving forward. Keep fighting. Keep searching for the truth, even when it seemed like the truth had already taken everything from her. As they made their way home, Sarah felt a strange sense of finality, mixed with an undercurrent of unease that would never quite leave her. The mystery had changed her. The lies, the betrayals, the danger, it had all reshaped the person she was. She could never go back to the way things were. But she had to believe that, despite everything, there was a reason she had fought so hard. There had to be. And as the door to their home clicked shut behind them, as Sarah and Emily settled into the quiet of their lives, The one thing that remained certain was that the shadows would always be there, lurking just beyond the edges of the light. And perhaps that was the true lesson she would carry with her forever, that the truth, no matter how powerful, could never fully erase the darkness. But that didn't mean she wouldn't keep searching for it. The story may have ended for now, but Sarah knew, deep down, that the next chapter was always just around the corner. And no matter what it brought, she would be ready. Stay tuned, because the next twist is coming, and you won't see it coming.